This plant right here is probably the fastest growing plant that I have ever personally grown. Today you're going to find out why I'm growing it, what it is, and how you can grow it coming up. Thanks for watching the video today. I'm Diego, D-I-E-G-O. And when I first got into gardening, I heard Joel Salatin tell this story of the early settlers that came into the Shenandoah Valley on the East Coast, Virginia, I believe. And they could tie knots in the grass by sitting on the horse's back. The grass was that tall. So imagine grass over your head. Well, fast forward ahead a little bit, and I visited my good friend Charles Mayfield's, and I saw Johnson grass that was literally over my head. I thought, this is crazy, this is insane, this is an anomaly. And now here I am in the land where there isn't any grass, Southern California, and I have grass that's over the top of my head. This is Sorghum Sudangrass, and in terms of a biomass producing cover crop, it is insane. Off the charts, fastest growing plant I've ever grown. This plant was planted, how many weeks ago do you think this was? 8, 9, 10, 12? None of the above. 6. 6 weeks ago, I planted this. And no doubt, I think this plant is growing over 12 inches a week. That's 12 inches a week here on October 10th, when we have cooler nights, cooler days, and day length is going down. I can't imagine how much this would grow over the summer. So by far, fastest growing plant that I've ever grown. So that's great. That's, we're not making a Guinness Book of World Record attempt here. Why would I actually be growing this? Well, I'm growing it because Sorghum Sudangrass is an amazing cover crop. It puts a lot of biomass above ground, obviously. A lot of this above ground biomass is echoed and reversed underground. And it's also putting a lot of root exudate, liquid carbon into the soil as these leaves harvest sugars, send them down the plant, put them into the root, and pump them out in the soil to feed microbes. So you get 3 amazing things happening with cover crops like this. Massive above ground biomass, massive below ground biomass, and a lot of root exudate entering the soil to feed microbes. Add those all up, combine them, and you get a crop that can break up soil and build soil really fast. Just to give you a better look at the crop, I pulled up one of the plants. Now this is one seed, and this is like a bunch grass, probably not the technical correct biological term, it's just what it looks like. You get a bunch of grasses from one seed. So this isn't like 10 seeds went into one hole. One seed and you get all these little stalks coming up. And if I put this on the ground, like it's on the ground right now, and hi, I'm somewhere in here. So you get a massive amount of thick stalked biomass, and then here's what your root looks like. So you get really thin roots at the bottom, while the upper part of the plant and kind of the base support roots look a lot like corn. When you start to pull it up, you get real fibrous roots. I think they're thinner roots than corn, but this is really what we're after under the soil. Put as much of these roots as we can under the soil, let them feed the microbes, and leave the roots in there at the end of the day. But just an amazing, amazing fast-growing plant. Currently, the Sorghum Sudangrass is planted where I was growing potatoes over the summer. When I was harvesting those potatoes, I felt like the ground had a compaction layer in it. Not necessarily from my activity, but from just how I've built these beds up above the soil surface. And I wanted to try and break that up. Also, the soil felt a little tight, it felt hard. And I wanted to put a crop in here that could bust this up. That's why I planted Sorghum Sudangrass. Still some potatoes actually growing under there that look like they're doing pretty well. Given that I've never grown Sorghum Sudangrass before, I'm not really sure how high it can get. I've heard it can grow 10 to 12 feet tall, believe it or not. I mean, that's insane. But I don't want it to get anywhere near that high, because when it starts getting near its ultimate height, what else is going to happen in the biological process? It's going to start to form a seed head, and I don't want that. I don't want this plant to go to seed, and I really don't want it to stop growing. So to cut or not to cut? In order to answer that question, we really have to start with asking another question. Why are you growing the crop in the first place? Because depending on your answer to why you're growing it, you may or may not want to cut it now. And this goes for a lot of cover crops, at least the ones that can regrow. So grasses like sorghum Sudangrass, if you cut them, they'll regrow. Crops like mustard, once you cut them, they're not coming back. So, but when we have grasses, you have to say, what's the point here? What am I trying to do? Well, in my case, I'm trying to do a few things. One, I'm trying to put as much root exudate into the soil as possible, meaning I want these plants to harvest as much sunlight as they can, biologically convert it into liquid sugars, and push that into the soil so microbes can flourish and that microbial community can just go through the roof and go up as high and count hopefully as high as these plants go above surface. I also want as many roots in the soil as possible, not just because that means more exudates are going in the soil, but these plants have very fine roots and they're fibrous roots, they're dense. And I want those roots to just go out into the soil and just bust up clods to break new layers. If there is any compaction in my beds, I want them to try and push through it. And if you think about the end of this plant's life cycle, when I eventually want this plant out of here, what's going to happen? Well, eventually I'm going to terminate it, probably by just cutting it off its surface. All those roots that I grew over the past few months will just remain in the soil. So for me, this is a long-term thing. I don't want the plant to go to seed. I don't want the plant to terminate. I want the plant to be in soil as much as possible for as long as possible until I need this bed again. Because when it's in soil, it's working for me, really, for free. Putting roots and root exudates into the soil and giving me mulch and compost feedstock above surface. So there's no hurry to kill this. And I'm just going to actually try and speed it up and enhance its growth by cutting it back. Because when I cut it back, it's going to think it was grazed by some sort of animal, and it's going to want to shoot back up and say, I need to try and reproduce. So let's mechanically graze this right now. So when you cut the plant, what can you do with them? Well, I've done a whole bunch of videos on this, and there's really a few options. Number one, you can just chop and drop. Cut the plant and put it on the soil surface. Two, you could take it and you could maybe dry it out and use it for a carbon source and compost later. Maybe you could feed it to animals and use it as a hay source. You could also use it as a compost feedstock or some sort of bedding for your animals. So there's a lot of options. In my case, I'm going to be doing chop and drop. I'm just going to cut it and put it on soil surface where it is. Why that option? Well, I don't really need any more compost to be made right now. I have a lot of composting projects happening, so I don't need that. So I'm just going to mulch the soil surface, and it looks like that's going to be the easiest route, and I'm kind of in a hurry today. So I'm just going to be chopping and dropping. In terms of cutting, it cuts really easy, kind of feels like celery or green onion in consistency. I have 3 rows on a 30-inch bed right here. I was hoping I could just lay a bunch of this down the center. That's not happening. So I'm just gonna have to try and mix and match and kind of Tetris my way down the aisle, putting this wherever I can on the soil surface. Looking at it, 3 rows on a 30-inch bed is probably too tight. I think if I ever did it again, I would just do 2 rows on a 30-inch bed. If you think about this in terms of dry weight, most of it's going to go away. It's going to go back up into the atmosphere, and what remains goes back into the soil. You may say, well, I'm losing it all to the atmosphere. Well, that's okay, because where did this come from in the first place? It came from the atmosphere, so we're just sending it back up there, but we've kept all that carbon below soil in the form of exudates, which have fed microbes and roots. So we've leveraged this equation. We've taken from the atmosphere, we've put stuff in the soil to store. We're going to keep a little bit of it from here, and we'll give some of it back. So enjoy it. Help us again. One thing I've noticed whenever I bring up cover crops is people tend to say, how much does the seed cost? How much does the seed cost? And that's a fair question, but I feel like I've answered this in almost every video that I've done about cover crops. Seed cost, when it comes to growing cover crops on a garden scale, is negligible, meaning it's basically zero. Think about this. This is a bag of seed of Sorghum Sudangrass that I planted right here. This is a 5-pound bag. It was $15 for 5 pounds, $3 a pound, and I am using like a teaspoon in one of these beds. This one bag will last me years and years and years. So if I try and take $3 a pound and divide that by 100, what am I at? 3 cents a bed? It is essentially nothing. On a large scale farm, if you were grazer and you wanted to plant cover crops on your land, or you're a row crop farmer and you had 5,000 acres, cover crops are a significant potential expense, especially when margins are thin. On a garden scale, when this is a hobby, $15 in seed that might last you kind of a lifetime, it's a non-expense. And if you're wondering where I got these seeds from, I got them right here from Seed Ranch. You can check them out. I found them, they didn't find me. There's no paid advertising here. I just really like this seed, so I'm giving them a plug. Seed Ranch is where I got my Sorghum Sudangrass seeds. I'll link to them below. No affiliate link or anything. I just like the seed. There we have it. The row is cut. Cut actually really easy. Like I said, probably cutting celery, green onions, that consistency. No smell like onions, no smell like brassicas, which is one thing I hate when you're growing mustard. They smell when you cut them, and they really smell when they decompose. This is just a grass. I layered it up on the ground. It's not so thick it's going to have that anaerobic smell, I don't think. We'll see. But it was basically just a ground mulch around the plants. And I think it's a really cool concept to have a plant that can mulch itself. I mean, there's not a lot of plants that we grow in the garden that do that, where you can chop them down, feed the soil, cool the soil, cover the soil below them, and then have them keep growing. Pretty cool concept. So Sorghum Sudangrass in the garden, I love the idea of it. I'll keep you updated on this regrowth process. If you want to get more frequent updates, check me out on Instagram at Diego Footer, and you can see more frequent pictures versus videos. But I will measure this regrowth, and we'll get to see, how much does this actually grow at this time of year? How fast is it growing? If you have any questions about anything I've done in this video, please leave them in the comments below. Happy to answer them. And if you've never tried growing Sorghum Sudangrass, think about growing it next year, or maybe right now, depending on where you're at in the world. Thanks for watching the video. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.